Welcome to Just Saying, a podcast produced by and recorded at Tri-State Worship Center. Now here are your hosts, Allison Gardner and Pastor Terry Wagner.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Just Saying podcast.
Welcome back. Well, there's this audience probably does not remember.
Welcome back, Connor.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
See? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, I'm here with my pastor, Terry Wagner.
You're 0 for 2 today.
Yeah.
Over.
I'm just not doing well with the references.
Hi, Allison.
Hey.
Can I just say thank you for doing what you're doing to help us get this podcast done? We appreciate it. We really do.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, guys.
Remind me to insert applause
Yes.
later
And
in post-production.
Maybe a drum
Sure.
roll or something.
Too kind. You're too kind.
Thank you, Tyler, for being the sound
thanks,
technician to
Tyler.
enter
Insert
applause.
Well, thank you very, very much. You are much appreciated.
Yes. All right. Well, today we are talking about bullying and cyberbullying. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
This-
I forgot. You didn't cue me. Dun, dun, dun.
But yeah, so it should be an interesting.
Well, it's going to
interesting
be, it will
conversation.
be interesting.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna put you on the spot, Allison.
Oh no.
But I'm not gonna tell you when.
No, I'm nervous. Oh no.
Yay!
All right. So
Wait a minute. Was that just an example of?
bullying?
Bullying?
I don't know.
We'll see.
Do you have the definition of bullying written down?
I do.
Okay. You want to go ahead and read that?
Well, I will. I want to say again, the whole theme of the podcast is to look at life issues through the lens of Scripture. Just saying. And that bullying is seeking to harm, intimidate, or coerce someone who is perceived as vulnerable. And then cyberbullying is the use of electronic communication to do that, to harm, intimidate, or coerce a person, typically by sending messages of an intimidating or threatening nature. So bullying, cyberbullying, is just the attempt at trying to harm, intimidate, or coerce someone that is typically perceived as vulnerable. So there you go.
Okay.
I was
So-
ready. I wrote that down.
Yeah, I know. You always write the definition
Well,
down. That's why I ask.
Yes, I did.
All right. Well, today we are talking about bullying and cyberbullying. So my first question is, why do you think, if you do think, that bullying has gotten worse over the years?
Wow. You see, this is where I was going to flip the script, but then you said, if you do
If you
think,
do think.
boom, boom, boom. Let me ask you, do you think it's worse, and why do you think it's worse?
I think that the internet has brought a whole new ball game to the, bullying scene, I guess.
Agreed.
And maybe it hasn't gotten worse. It's just gotten more highlighted or publicized and stuff to a wider audience. But I don't.
Yeah,
I would say yeah.
I think I agree with you. I think information is so much more accessible now. I mean, I remember I took a class with Chad Pennington. Now, Tyler will remember Chad Pennington. Allison, 0 for 3.
0 for 3?
No, no.
Chad Pennington was the football quarterback for
Okay,
Marshall
I thought he was a
University.
football
Yes.
player. The
And
name sounded familiar.
He got injured. Now I graduated in 2003. I didn't start college till I was 36 years old, but he got injured during practice, and before he could even call his parents to tell them what happened, they heard about it on social media. So I do think that the information is just so much more readily available. But I think there's a couple other potential reasons why it seems to be more intense now. I'm not ready to say that I think it is worse. I think bullying was around when I was in high school in the 70s and in elementary school in the 60s. I think it's changed. I think it's evolved, and we can talk about that. But I think one of the reasons is because more information. I think the second reason that I was thinking about was that bullies from the 80s and 90s have grown up and have children.
Yeah, and they're raising bullies.
And I think they're
Yeah.
I think hurt people hurt people. I
Right.
think bullied people
Bully
raise
people.
bullies.
Yeah.
And they don't see it as wrong because they don't want to see themselves as wrong, right? But I also think there's another little element in here that's probably going to cause us a little pushback, and that is, I think that we are seeing more and more generations of people feeling entitled. And I know that's probably a hard word for some people to hear, but I think that, people who feel entitled, that would either, one, say that you are a vulnerable person, therefore I'm entitled to bully you, that, or number two, that, you have something that I wished I had that I don't have. And so since I can't have it, I'm going to bully you over it. You go back all the way back and, hey, give me your lunch money, right? I'm entitled to your lunch money. Give me your lunch money. And if you don't, I'm going to pop you in the nose. I'm going to, or today I'm going to make you look bad on your Facebook page. Or I guess, well, we don't do Facebook anymore, do we? It's all the other things that are out there. So, I think information's more readily available. Bullies are raising bullies. Some people feel entitled. And then the last thing I would say, if it has gotten worse, I think in some instances it's because people in authority, whether that's parents and or teachers and or administration in the schools, are letting it happen. I think there are schools, and I've talked to some people in the education system, where there's zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. If a bullying incident comes to the office, that person is dealt with, and they're dealt with harshly. But then there's other school systems that don't deal with it as harshly. Now, again, I'm just kind of going off of what I've been learning about bullying over the last several years. But some schools, it's not happening because the zero tolerance policy. But then, unfortunately, that's not the case in all situations. So if it is worse, I think it's worse because of information is quickly available. I think it's worse because bullies are raising bullies. I think some people feel entitled, and then I think some people in authority are just turning a blind eye, to the whole situation and not giving it the kind of weight that it should have.
Right. Yeah. Tyler?
Well, I think another big issue with the authority figures in these scenarios, and I can speak from a teacher's point of view, is that we don't have a lot of power. The way that we deal with kids and discipline kids has changed a lot over the years. And you so much can't even raise your voice, right, to get a student's attention without it being turned into, my teacher was bullying me. Mm-hmm. And students have cell phones and devices to record and things like that. So teachers are sometimes afraid to get involved because they don't want to, hurt themselves. Not that that's a good reason.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you. But the tension is that, society, I will say society, has kind of taken discipline away from parents. Mm-hmm. If there was such a thing as CPS when I was growing up, I could have called them and been delivered from my home at any point because, my dad was a strict disciplinarian. But that's kind of been removed. But then, the only other option is then educators. Yeah. But now we've taken that away from them. And so...
And even the police.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of goes back to my one element of entitlement. Yeah. We're kind of weaving that into the fabric of young people to think that, I can pretty much do what I want to do and nobody's going to do anything about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a key to that whole discipline thing is that we've moved away from the mentality that it takes a village, to raise a child, to show them what is right and what is wrong. It's the parents, this is how, the way that I've seen it in my experience, the parents' decision solely, you're not going to tell my child what to do and stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
Make that decision for me on how to parent. It's up to me and me alone rather than a community effort. You know what I mean?
Which wouldn't be so bad if all of us parents could, adopt a standard way of discipline. Right. I don't know if you can. And the people who listen to this podcast, I think it's fair to say that this table was represented in three generations.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, Allison is the youngest generation. Tyler could be my son in that generation, and I'm the old man here. So I think you have three different perspectives, but I do believe that you know, it comes back to some respect, some accountability, and some consequences. And I think all, you know, in all three of those areas, we could probably get a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So something that has been, heavy on social media lately, just everywhere, is cancel culture. So, first of all, tell me what you think cancel culture is.
It's bullying.
Yeah.
It's absolutely bullying. It's just a new way of doing it, right? It's a way to intimidate or to threaten a livelihood or a way of living based on something that you don't like. In my day, cancel culture wasn't called cancel culture. It was called don't watch them if you don't like them. Don't buy it if you don't like it. And those issues would take care of themselves. But now it's not that way anymore. Today, so much has changed in the last 25 to 30 years as I have grown. I mean, and Allison's probably getting ready to go 0 for 4 right here. She's already 0 for
Oh,
3.
Lord.
All in the Family.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
in the Family was a show when I was growing up.
Archie Bunker.
Archie Bunker, an obvious racist and bigot. They didn't hide it.
Yeah.
They did not hide it, but they talked about it.
Yeah.
Right? Can you imagine All in the Family being on TV today?
It wouldn't.
It would not be because of the cancel culture. But yet, they would have canceled a show that really addressed the issue, addressed the problem.
Yeah.
And so I think cancel culture has affected our world because we have other people that are determining what we get to hear or see or
Yeah.
buy or whatever the case might be because
Right.
they determine we need to cancel this because cancel this person, which I'm probably went too deep on this, but I don't know if you knew this, but that term came from a film in the 90s. Wesley Snipes was playing a crime boss, and he ends up getting rid of his girlfriend. And the way he does it is he says to her, "You're canceled." All right. Then Lil Wayne picked it up in 2010. I know
Yeah.
you're surprised. I know Lil Wayne, aren't you?
Lil Wayne.
He picked it up in 2010 and had that line in a rap, a song.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then in, I think, 2014, I wrote it down somewhere, 2014, there was an episode of Love and Hip Hop New York on MTV, I'm sorry, VHS1, where one cast member, Cisco Rosado, tells his love interest, Diamond Strawberry, during a fight that you're canceled. He says that. He goes, "You're canceled."
Diamond Strawberry.
Oh, boy.
Oh, I got to change my name. Terry T. Berry. I don't know, something. So, the whole phrase came from, movies that probably can't be played today.
Yeah.
I was watching a movie Saturday night. I'm going to tell you what movie it was. It was a movie that was filmed in the 90s. And the context of the 90s is a lot different than the context of today.
Yeah.
But they had to put a disclaimer on the front of the movie. This movie was recorded at a time,
Yeah. I've
when
seen
things
that.
are different, and some things that are said or reflected here might be offensive to some people.
They've done that with, I don't know if you guys are Disney Plusers. There's some documentaries about Walt Disney and how Disneyland came to be and the Imagineers and all that. And there's a disclaimer before every one that this may be reflect a different culture at a different time or something like that. So you're seeing that even on,
Yeah.
Disney programs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that it's affected our world by taking our freedom to choose.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not even saying that anything that they've done is necessarily wrong or bad. Although, I can think of some people that have been canceled that probably shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And again, back in my day, you wanted to get it canceled, quit watching it, quit buying it, quit, whatever. And the market, if I could say it that way, the market kind of took care of itself. But now we got people that's just taking it into their own hands and they cancel or call for that
Yeah.
in people's lives and careers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the most that I've seen cancel culture is on TikTok. And just, people will say something or make one mistake and you think you know the whole story. And so automatically they're canceled.
Yeah.
And you have permission to harass that person and comment on all their videos. You need to release an apology, blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't deserve to be here. Don't follow this person because of that.
And that's based on someone's opinion,
Yeah.
right? It's based on what a person or a group of people might think. And, again, I'm not sure that anybody owns the right to do that. And in the world that we live in today, rather than people sit down and do what we're doing, just have a conversation. We can't do that because, Allison, if you don't agree with me 100%, then you're wrong and you need to be canceled. And I'm the one that gets to determine that. And I think that really steps all over, obviously, freedom of speech and the idea of, that I can have my ideas and you can have your ideas, and they might be different, but we can still be friends. Waving the Tri-State Worship Center flag for just a minute. We've been doing a thing on Wednesday nights called The Conversation. And the conversation has been pretty much about the social and racial unrest in our country. And I have on the platform with me Larry and Stacy Metcalf, who are an African-American couple. I have Josh and Brittany Wilkerson, which are a mixed couple. Josh is black and Brittany's white, and then me and Vicky. And we're just having a conversation. But I can promise you, if we went around that group to talk about political ideas, there'd probably be a lot of disagreement on that platform. And that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, they're entitled to their opinion. I'm entitled to mine.
Right.
But you're not allowed to say that out loud. If you say something out loud that's different than what somebody thinks it should be, you're canceled.
Right. And I don't think that, just from my experiences, people who agree fully on everything, having a conversation about stuff like that, it doesn't benefit anybody to talk with someone you agree completely on.
Right.
It just affirms your opinion.
Right.
You're not growing at all or understanding things from another perspective. You're just affirming.
Right.
So healthy disagreement is good. But anyways, so why is cancel culture toxic in your opinion?
Well, I think that we probably have talked about why it's toxic. Within the past 5 years, the rise of that culture, that cancel culture, and the idea of canceling someone because they have a polarizing idea or a polarizing thought or something that's different than what I think it should be or what you think it should be. I think it removes from the table their part of the conversation, to have that conversation that, who's to say that some of what they are doing or what they said, and you can include into this the Me Too movement, right?
Right.
We saw the effect that can have on, that really is a cancel culture if you want to, just be down to the basics about it.
Right,
but it
right.
I think it becomes toxic because we are excluding people from a conversation. And when I say conversation, I'm not talking about necessarily like what we're doing, but just, societal conversation.
Right.
That maybe it's something we need to learn from, good or bad. We need to learn from it, right?
Well, yeah, and I look at it like this too, because there are people who advocate and say that the riots and things that were going on at a certain time were an example of freedom of expression and speech, but it was also destructive. How is that better than having a conversation?
Right.
And so I agree 100%. Why are we dismiss? And I think that's why we see some things happen in that respect, is because they were dismissed from the conversation, so they chose another outlet
Right.
to be heard.
Yeah. So circling back to bullying, do you think that Christians have a responsibility to speak out when they see bullying or even experience it?
Well, I mean, obviously, bullying in the pure sense of the word, as far as trying to intimidate or coerce or even hurt, those who seem to be vulnerable, obviously that's sin. That's a sin, plain and simple. I mean, WWJD.
Yeah.
I mean, what would Jesus do? It's a sin. So, does the church or the Christian have a responsibility? Absolutely. I think to speak out against bullying, to reveal and expose bullying when it's happening. The church, over the history of the church, is not exempt from this bullying thing. It's happened in churches. I apologize on this podcast for how much it has happened in churches.
Oh, yeah.
You know, not just in the congregation, but even in leadership. And I mean, there's ways that bullying happens that's so covert, so under the radar that it's really hard to determine. But, you know, I do think we have to speak out. And the simple fact is 1 John 2:9, whoever says that he is in the light but hates his brother is still in darkness. I mean, how else can you interpret that other than, you know, you should treat everybody the same. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. You can't say you love God and hate your brother.
Right.
I mean, all those scriptures, Matthew chapter 5, verse 43, you've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, Jesus speaking, to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So, yeah, I think we definitely have a responsibility to speak out and to say something against bullying. And when we don't, I think silence is just a stamp of approval.
Yeah.
You know, if we don't say something. So, yeah, I think we have to say something about it.
Right.
And to help our children. I have a grandson that's 11 years old. I'm going to call his name out. His daddy may not want me to, but his name's Jonas. And Jonas is my buddy. I mean, he and I have been together since he was 6 weeks old, you know. And he's grown to be a big man. He's 11 years old, but he's about 6 foot tall and weighs 200 pounds.
Yeah.
He's a big man. But he has got just the softest heart. He is just a teddy bear. And, you know, there's concerns in the family that, you know, he's going to now enter into middle school. And I know from my own experience, you know, a lot of times bullies don't always just go after what looks like the most vulnerable. They want to go after the big guy.
Right. To
Because-
make them feel bigger.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. And so there's some concern there. And I think as a church, we need to help those children that are victims of, not just the ones that are doing the bullying. The ones that are doing the bullying, listen, it's a sin. You need to repent. You need to quit doing it.
Yeah.
But those of you that are victims of that, you know, parents, the church, we have a responsibility to help you navigate that as well. And I think that we have been lax on that. And maybe because, you know, I grew up in a different era. I have these blinders on. When I got hit in the nose by a baseball when I was 11 years old, it broke my nose. My dad looked at me and said, "Get up and keep playing."
Yeah.
And so I did, you know. And I just think that
Rub some dirt on it.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Keep the blood from going everywhere. But I think that it's a different time now, and these are issues that need to be addressed. But I think too often we just ignore them, and that's not that. All that's doing is putting a stamp of approval on it, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Well, I have another question off script.
No, you can't do that,
I'm
Allison.
throwing you a curveball.
Oh boy.
So.
Oh, you did see that? I got hit in the nose
Baseball
with a baseball, and then she makes a baseball reference. Very good.
Thank you. So in my experience, just being a teenager and being around different people, I have seen people whose sense of humor, and like you said, you were talking about how people get offended over everything, but this is something that's really close to my heart, whose sense of humor revolves around making other people feel uncomfortable or offended or hurt. And then, you know, using the excuse, well, you need to learn how to take a joke. So what is your spiel on that?
Well, that's a hard one. And because in some instances I'm that guy.
Yeah, you just need to take a joke.
No, I'm the one
you're
that
the
says
one.
it.
Oh, okay.
I'm confessing right here
Yeah.
on the podcast.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you this quick story. There was I was a choir director at a church before we planted Tri-State Worship Center, and there was an elderly lady in the choir. She always was kind of just slow about everything, about getting there, about getting her robe on, about knowing. And when we would rehearse, I'd say, okay, turn to page 68, letter B. That's where we're starting. One night she stopped me. She's like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear where you said we're starting. And I said something to her, you know, I don't remember exactly what I said, but something in the framework of, you know, come on, Sue. That wasn't her real name. So, come on, Sue. You heard me. Let's, you know. And I just kind of like made a little funny, right? After practice, she said, I need to talk to you for a minute. I was like, okay. So we go down to my office, and she said, you know how you said that to me in choir practice? I was like, yeah. She goes, that's how my husband talks to me. It makes me feel really bad. I mean,
Right. Obviously, I think I know we've used this word a lot on here, but it's intention.
yeah.
I think, you know, your intent obviously was not to hurt her feelings.
No, not at all, man. I mean, you could have hit me with a wet rag right then, and,
Right.
and I just. But how do I? I mean, the intent of my heart was not. I would. That's anybody that knows me. That's just not who I am.
Right.
I don't say anything to try to hurt someone's feelings. But then she was hurt. So how do you? You know, how do you do that? How do you?
There's been times where you come limping up the stairs in the sound booth, and I kind of give you a little.
Thanks a lot, Tyler. I've been
Yeah.
I've been crying over that.
But I know you, and I know that you know me in my
Right,
heart,
yes.
and know that I don't mean in a mean way or a bullying way. But I think there are those that will use that, oh, come on, take a joke, as a kind of a blanket to cover up
Right,
the
yeah.
fact that they are bullying somebody.
Yeah.
So what do you say, Allison, to like just take the scenario that I was just talking about. My intent was not to be ugly, but she took it that way. And to her credit, she came to me.
Right. I think that's the best thing that you can do. Just go to that person and say, listen, that hurt my feelings. And I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't make fun of that anymore.
Right.
And then just, if that person doesn't respect that, then obviously it's bullying, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but if your whole sense of humor revolves around making other people feel bad, I don't really think you're funny.
Right.
So-
And because that goes back to the old saying, if I can make you look bad, it makes me look better.
Right.
And I think when people adopt that as their personality,
Yeah.
then they got a problem.
Right.
They have a big problem.
I agree, yeah.
So that's I think we all could do a good gut check on that.
Right, right. So my next question is, should Christians expect to be bullied for their faith?
Well, I'd love to sit here and say, well, no. Once you give your heart to Jesus,
Yeah.
everything will be fine. But that's not the case. I mean, Christians, believers of all faiths, not just Christians, but since we are Christians, I mean, all people have been persecuted for what they believe for thousands of years. I mean, it's happening now as it happened 5,000 years ago. And as a matter of fact, John 15:20 said, Jesus is talking. He said, since they persecuted me, naturally they're going to persecute you. And so I think that I don't want to say we should expect it, but you have to understand that light and darkness cannot coexist. And when your light as a Christian begins to expose the darkness of someone who doesn't believe, that's going to make them very uncomfortable. And unfortunately, most people's go-to then is a big pushback of some sort to persecute you for what you believe. And I think that's unfortunate because we live in a time when it's expected that if I don't agree with your worldview, then there's something wrong with me. That seems to be the motto of today. If you don't agree with me, then I don't have the problem, you do. And so the person who doesn't believe Christianity, they're probably going to push back and they're going to persecute, but I don't think we should respond as believers. I don't think we should respond in the same way. I've said this from the pulpit a couple times. I have never led someone to Jesus in a prayer of confession. I have never led someone to Jesus by winning an argument. You know, I've never had some arguing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then them go, "You win, I'll get saved." You know, I've never had that happen.
Unfortunately, it's a lot like politics. You know, when you enter in a conversation with somebody about politics, it can get really heated.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that's what has to separate a conversation about, you know, your religion from your political stance, is that you're representing the body of Christ.
Sure.
And claiming to be a Christian, you should behave and respond and react how you feel, you know, a Christian would. And
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it's a very, I know I mean, you can get made fun of for a song you like, or a movie you like, or a movie you don't like. You've never seen Star Wars? You don't like Star Wars?
Don't say that to Alice.
You know?
She'll be 0 for 5.
She knows what Star Wars
I know
is.
what Star Wars
Yay!
is.
But you know what I mean? So it's like, of course somebody's going to have something
Yeah.
to say about, you know, your political stance. Of course somebody's going to have something to say about, you know, your religious views.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what separates that from those others is, you know, I think somebody in an instance like that, especially if it is a bully, what they're probably going to try to do is to get you to respond in a way that doesn't line up with
Yeah.
your religious views.
Yeah, it's like, gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and also just keep in mind that, you know, a believer is going to remind a person that may not be a believer that there is a moral plumb line, that there is a standard of truth, you know, that we try to adhere to, and someone who doesn't have that particular belief, or they don't see it that way, then that's not gonna make them feel like the best person in the world.
yeah.
So you can, I think, because of that, in some cases, not always, obviously, but in some cases, you can expect they're gonna
little blowback.
Yeah, they're going to come back on you, and that's okay. You know, that's okay. It's not like they're not shutting you down necessarily. You at least, you know, got your point out there, whatever the case might be. But yeah, it's going to come, and I've gotten it. You know, in 40 years of being a born again believer, I've gotten that from people.
Well, and even within the umbrella of Christianity and the different denominations, and that's why I love the way that you say, you know, especially with like gifts of the Spirit or you know, receiving the Holy Spirit. Does that make you better than so and so? No, it doesn't. But it makes me better than I would be without it.
Right.
And it's not a competition. It's not anything like that. It's just about trying to be the best person you can be for Christ.
Yeah.
And
Well, even trying to have the interreligious conversation between different denominations or different, you know, and I wished we could get a hold of this in a way that could really affect change. And that is, every evangelical Protestant church believes the same basic tenets of faith. That is, God created the world, Adam and Eve fell from grace, Jesus came to die on the cross, he died, was buried, resurrected, ascended to the Father, he's coming back again someday, and he left us this thing called the Bible as an instruction booklet until he gets back. We all believe that.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're Nazarene, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal, we all believe that. But for some reason, even in interreligious conversation or interdenominational conversations, we don't ever want to talk about what we have in common.
Right.
We always want to talk about what we have as differences. And it's those differences that cause the tension, and it's the tension then that leads to someone saying, you know, something in a bullying kind of way, or an awkward way, or a persecuting kind of way, that, you know, you just have to be ready for that, and it's going to happen. But, you know, since they persecuted Jesus, they're going to persecute us, and we should really expect it.
Right. So would you go as far to say that if we don't experience that, then we're doing something wrong?
Well, I don't want to bully you into this, but yeah, I mean, I've said this from the pulpit, and if someone cannot see a difference in you since you came to know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you might need to revisit that altar of salvation, because there's going to be a change. There's going to be something different. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I had a best friend in growing up from the time I can remember, 3-4 years old. He was my next door neighbor. His name was Keith. I won't tell you his last name. But we hung together constantly. And then as we got into our teenage years, we did a lot of bad stuff together, awful stuff together.
That's the next episode.
Yeah, the awful stuff of Terry
All the bad
Wagner.
things I've done.
The day after I had gone to church and recommitted my life to the Lord, Keith came over with some illegal material, drugs. And I told Keith, I was like, listen, I recommitted my life to the Lord last night, and I'm just not going to do that stuff anymore. And this guy that I've known since I can remember being alive, and I was 17 at the time, looked at me, called me a really bad name, walked away, and I never heard from him again.
Wow.
Right? So, I mean, maybe your experience won't be that drastic. But yeah, I think people need to see. Everybody's like, I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want to lose no more friends. But
Yeah.
I think it has. I think it
Right.
has to be seen.
But that shows you who your friends are.
Well,
Yeah.
that's true
That
too.
guy
Yeah.
obviously wasn't
He just
Yeah.
wanted
as
me
good of
to-
a friend as you thought.
Yeah, because I was good at doing the bad things that he was doing.
Yeah.
That he was doing.
Right, right.
Well, I did too. Okay, I did too. But
I would say I guess it's possible that somebody is so good in their walk and that people do notice a difference and they don't approach them because maybe, I mean, I don't know. I look at Allison and I couldn't imagine anybody bullying Allison. She's just so, you know what I mean?
Right,
She's
yeah.
just so sweet and
Yeah.
nice and proper, and maybe it has happened, maybe it hasn't. We don't have to discuss it. But I'm just saying, I guess it's possible that somebody could just have it right,
Right.
and not really experience that. I mean, maybe they could recall a time in their life where you could maybe call something, that resembles bullying, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, what do you think? Do you think it's possible that somebody could really just have that light radiating from them
I think
so brightly that
But I think that if that light is radiating from them so brightly,
Someone's going to want to tear it down.
right, someone's
Okay.
going to try to
Yeah.
put that light out.
Yeah.
Someone's
Makes
going to
sense.
do something, say something. And I agree with you. I mean, Allison, go to Allison.com.
Oh, my goodness.
She's a sweetheart, right? You could ever, but because of that, because of the goodness, I mean, even something as menial as, you see somebody who's just always smiling, always up,
Yeah.
and you think, what's wrong with them?
what are you
You
so
know,
happy
what's-
about?
yeah, exactly. And you may not ever say anything to them, but is that not some form of either persecution and or bullying?
It's true. Yeah.
Right.
When that happens. So yeah, I think if we're shining the light like we should, we're going to attract some bugs.
Right.
Wow.
The gospel's offensive.
It is.
It's-
It
It really
is.
It if you're preaching it, you're gonna that. I think that if you are not receiving backlash for, witnessing to your friends, then, it's just you're telling people they're sinners.
Yeah.
You're living in sin.
Yes, it's going to be offensive.
It's going to be offensive,
Yeah.
but it's necessary.
But I do think that there are times like Ray Comfort, Way of the Master. I mean, the
Yeah.
way he does it's kind of cool, right?
Right, right.
Do you believe in God? No. He said, well, have you ever lied? And he goes through that, and it can be offensive, but the way he does it,
Is-
you almost feel like, okay,
Yeah.
you offended me, but that's okay. I think as long as it depends on us, we are to live peaceably with all people. I think the Bible tells us that our conversation should be gentle, right, and attractive.
Yeah.
But yet there are times when you say to someone, hey, if you don't change your ways and Jesus comes back or you leave this world, there's going to be hell to pay.
Right.
And when you say that, that's going to be offensive, and somebody's going to push back. Someone's going to begin to persecute you over it. But I do think there's ways to have the conversation
That's
that more times than not doesn't go that way, right?
I always try to imagine whether or not this person, when I'm talking to them, sees a finger wagging in their face, because I'd never want to come off like
Right.
that, because
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Right.
If I've got somebody pointing fingers at me,
Yeah.
but knowing the ways to have that conversation, and your audience,
Right.
what you can and can't say to, or how you word it differently
Yeah.
could be more approachable, I guess.
Right.
Well, you guys know me. I got all kinds of stories. But I was on my way to church one time. This was way back when I was in Indianapolis. I wore a suit to church. I don't wear suits anymore except for the weddings and funerals. But I stopped to get some gas, and it was a Sunday morning on the way to church. And this guy at the cashier, he's like, "So you on your way to church?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus. Try to do my best." And we just entered into a conversation, just casual conversation. And I say to him, "What about you? What do you think's going to happen after you leave this world?" And he goes, "Well, I just think we just come back as part of nature, and there's not really a heaven and hell." And I didn't listen, you big dummy. I didn't do that.
Wake up.
Silly guy.
I didn't say, "Here, touch this fire." But I did say to him, because even in a 2-minute conversation, I felt like I knew my audience well enough, the way the conversation was going. I just said, "Listen, if you're right, I don't have anything to worry about. Maybe a lawnmower coming every other week to cut me down a little bit. But I said, but if I'm right, you got a real problem.
Right.
And you should probably think about that." And I left. I didn't stay and get down on your knees there behind.
So what are you gonna do?
Yeah. You just
Make the choice.
you plant the seed, and even the Bible says someone plants, someone waters, but God adds the increase. And so, it doesn't always have to turn into this big arm wrestling match.
Oh, definitely.
I just think that sometimes the Word of God will offend people, but I think if we discern how God wants us to move forward in the conversation, it doesn't have to get to the point where it's
Right.
a back and forth arguing kind of thing.
Yeah.
I also think that sometimes that's a good way. Well, just like with your friend there, it's a good way to kind of weed those people out that are just gonna pull you down in a sense. I've got a story too.
Ooh.
Dun, dun, dun.
Switching things up.
It was July 2013. And I had just rededicated my life, and I had a group of friends that we would always go bowling on Wednesday nights at Blue Ribbon Lane in Ashland. And it was like $2 a game. You pay $2 for your shoes, you pay $2 a game. So we'd always go and bowl several games. And before this, I would partake in some alcoholic beverages.
This ends our broadcast for today.
Hey, wait a minute.
What?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so maybe even the next week, after I rededicated my life, we met up at this bowling alley, and so a particular friend of mine comes over with a pitcher of said drink, and some cups, and so he pours one and he sets it down in front of me, and I just kind of look up at him, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I'm like, "No, it's okay." I was like, "It's fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. I'm not going to drink it, but, thanks anyway."
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the kind of thing that shows you who your true friends are. If they're going to stick by you, and maybe that's not to say that he, I don't believe, we don't stay in that much communication anymore. But I don't believe that that's something that pushed him away from me.
Right.
I think it kind of separated me a little bit. But it didn't hurt that friendship. If I see him, still speak to him, maybe make a comment on his social media, something like that. But I do think that it's a good way to kind of weed through the bad ones.
So Tyler has better friends than I had, because my friend he
he
went away and
just
never came back.
left.
Tyler's friend's still
He
there.
just dropped you.
Tyler just bullied me.
I've got some friends that went away.
But you're right. I mean, I think we can present our Christ-likeness in ways that doesn't have to run people off. Matter of fact, we want to attract people, right? We want to attract people so that we can share. But I think persecution is going to happen. I think sometimes the bullying thing will happen, but we have to handle it as Jesus would. I mean, even when he went to the cross, right? He's arrested, beaten, goes to the cross. The Bible tells us he went silently
Right.
as a lamb to the slaughter.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes no response is a good response.
Yeah.
You
So
know.
basically, you just answered the last question.
I did?
Yeah.
Ooh.
So my last question was, what would the circumstances be to defend the faith or yourself, or choose to stay silent like
Yeah.
Jesus did?
Yeah, just I think we live in a world where tolerance and coexistence and all those things are trying to silence us, right? But I think silence is a good thing. But I do think there are times when it's time to say something. But a lot of times it's okay just to, okay, you get it off your chest and you yell at me or whatever you need to do, and I say, okay, I'll see you later, and move on. And again, I think it's the least used gift of the Spirit that we have in the church, and that's called discernment. You just have to discern when that is. I don't think anybody can tell you, in this situation, be silent. In this situation, respond. I think it's a in the moment opportunity that you just have to discern. Am I going to respond, or am I just going to be silent and let that just fester with that person?
Right. All right. Sounds good.
There you have it.
All right. Just saying.
Just saying. We don't. We
Didn't
need to
use
say
it
more
enough that
often.
time either.
I said at the very beginning. but
Whoops. Oh, well.
I'm just saying.
That's a good sign that you were involved in the conversation, though. You forgot.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Allison. You're so
You're
kind.
welcome. No problem. All right.
See,
Well,
who would bully her?
Right. I mean, who
That's
would
what I'm
bully
saying.
Allison?
who would bully me?
Just
No.
saying.
Just saying. But thank you guys so much for joining us. As always, you can email your questions to twagner977@gmail.com, and we will try and answer them. So we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.